Hallo Zusammen. As you can see from the title of this video, today I want to discuss an American's version of German stereotypes. Now, I will say that many of these stereotypes I was not aware of until living here in Germany. Some of them are stereotypes that I heard and had of Germany from being back in the US. And I thought it would be interesting to discuss them because many of them to me are debunked. They're just simply not true or not true to the extent in which I learned them. Every country, especially Germany, is so diverse with its people. There's so many different Bundesländer here, the food, the clothing, language, everything. So it's hard to reduce it down to such a small little snapshot of entire country. With that said, when I first moved here in 2018, I didn't know hardly anything about Germany besides beer, lederhosen, World War II, and that was it, to be honest. And in that trip here, which I had just made a short about, I found an old diary of myself. And the things that I remember is that I loved Heidelberg. I thought it was beautiful and green. I remember drinking out of das Boot, drinking a beer out of the big boot. And I just remember thinking it was really gorgeous, but that was all kind of the snapshot I've had of it. Now, fast forward, I've been living here for 7 years permanently, and I have learned much more about this country and its people. It's taught me to put back my assumptions of what you think of a place. I've learned this also through a variety of traveling I've done. Often the countries that you have like the strongest opinions on, and usually like negative stereotypes, it's so different once you're there. I think some stereotypes are brought on by a small group of people within a country, and once you're there, you just see how beautiful and diverse it is. So with that said, I want to get started and let you guys know what I think is true and false about stereotypes here in Germany. Let's get started. Number 1, punctual and efficient. I find this to be pretty true. In Germany, I go by the motto, on time is late. I think I've said this in past videos. If I'm ready on time, my husband, my German husband, he is already stressed and he is like, we're going to be late, we're going to be late. So here you have to be early to feel like you're on time. And I have experienced that in work. I've experienced that with friends. I've experienced that with appointments. If I'm not there, already 10 minutes before the appointment, I've had a call from a doctor, hey, are you still coming? So I think punctuality is really highly sought after here. It's also a sign of respect and not wasting someone's time, which I totally understand. So late is definitely considered rude. And if you're going for a job interview and you are not early, you are not getting that job. Just know that, okay? In terms of efficient, I looked up the definition of efficient. Efficient says, of a system or machine achieving maximum productivity with minimum wasted effort or expense. And I would say this is yine. So like yes and no. It's true at least in the modern generation. I feel like with the older generation, that's what they seek to achieve, but they have like old school techniques that they're not willing to get rid of, which are very like methodical, but not always efficient. For example, my German in-laws, they will cut the grass at the property like around the edge where they live. Instead of just getting like an edger, which would be done really quickly, they still get down on their knees and they cut it with the scissors. And I've asked them why they do this, and they say because they feel like it does a better job. And they have lots of little things like that. When they do the garden, they still water it by hand little by little because they want the exact perfect amount of water in the exact perfect place it goes. So there's a very methodical system of how they do it, but I wouldn't say that it's the most efficient. I think that's their intention, but I think that they're stuck in the ways that they did it before. Number 2 is Germans are serious and not funny. They're not humorous. Now, I think this one is an iffy. I have a lot of German friends and they're constantly cracking jokes and saying funny things. The problem is German, the language of German is so diverse and they have such this ability to wordplay and build new words that we don't have in English, that a lot of times as an English speaker and not a native German speaker, it just doesn't land for me. I just don't get it. So I think it's maybe hard for other cultures because thinking of a German person trying to make a joke in English, they just don't have that diversity of wordplay that exists in their language. Not to mention that I think that German humor is more dry and blunt or cultural specific. It has like American humor has more satire or maybe like sexual innuendos or is more exaggerated, like, oh, I caught the fish this big, it's a little bit more of like absurd scenarios. And I think that just doesn't work for the humor here. So I think that it's simply that humor doesn't always pass over between different countries. But in actuality, I think that as I've started to learn the language and the culture, like certain things have become more funny for me. Number 3 is the love of rules and order. I feel like social order, structure, following the rules, for example, like waiting to walk before the little red man changes, like down to the second when it actually changes, recycling your trash, having to find appointments and making sure you're always on time. And what I mean by that is even with friends, like spontan is not really so much a thing where you just like pop over to a friend's or, you spontaneously meet friends. That's way less common. It's very much, they like to schedule appointments and having like, Ruhetag, like strict quiet hours. So it's definitely a part of the social norm here. I will say that in the younger generation, they're looking to maybe question it more or make changes on it. I'm not sure if they love it and they'll continue it forever. I think they're more open to those sorts of things, but it is such a strong portion of the culture here, at least from what I've seen up until now. Number 4, and I hate to admit this, I really hate to admit this, but I did think this a little bit before I came to Germany the first time. And honestly, that was the first trip I did. I came to Europe for 1 month and traveled to different countries. That was honestly the first time that I really left the country. Besides Canada, that was the first time that I had like really traveled abroad. And I think that I had such a closed-minded version of the world because of whatever reasons. I think because the way that we're taught in school in the US and not being aware and not being educated on the rest of the world, Number 4 is boiling Germany down to beer, bratwurst, and lederhosen. And I think that I remember thinking that I still thought that people dressed like that on a regular basis. Mind you, did I not realize that like lederhosen and dirndl are actually specific to Bayern? I didn't even know that. And, like related to Oktoberfest is also like specific to Bayern. I mean, I know that it's like spread to other parts of the country, but it actually originates there. But I really had that like closed-minded, not just of Germany, I think of many different countries, like boiling it down to this simple thing and thinking that people still walked around on a regular basis in clothes like that. That's such like a vision of, I think, what, when you see these videos online of Americans like getting interviewed and being like, hey, what country, name a country somewhere in the world, and they say Europe as a country or something like that. I think that just, maybe it speaks to the education of America, or a combination of myself and not educating myself. But anyways, I definitely like had that really closed-minded vision of here, and as I said, many other places, but that is such an oversimplified version of this country. And as I said, actually, is a very specific area in this country. I mean, there is so much more to here than those few things. So I would consider the stereotype highly untrue. It's a popular piece of German history and culture that people love. Number 5 is that Germans are cold and unfriendly, that they're seen as blunt, that they're seen as unwelcoming. And I will say that when I first came here, I did feel this way. It was hard for me to take the time to come in and get to know people. And I've talked about this in past videos, so I won't get into it in detail. But I think a large part was not being able to speak the language. Germans love when you try to speak their language. Sometimes they'll switch to English because it's easier, but I feel like there's a lot of people, like, they appreciate that you're trying to speak the language, and I feel like that you'll feel that warmness more. A big part of it also, and I've said this before, is that like Germans are like an onion. It takes time to peel back the layers. You need to get to know them. And if it was, if it's like the center of the earth, the outside is cold and the center is molten hot. And if you make it to that hot center, like that is a tight friendship and it's not going anywhere. And that goes, with colleagues and different things. It takes time to get to know someone and to build that relationship of trust. And so I think that it's just different than other countries where, there's a closer social bubble or a quicker social bubble, or I can't think of the word, but like the proximity of which you talk to one another and stuff. Like there's just more space and it takes time to warm up. But if you take the time and you get there, I think that is not true. So I would say it's a so-so. I think like with strangers, especially if you're traveling through, and especially if you're like a representation of the ugly American and not respecting things, like you will see that they're cold and not friendly. It's not like other cultures where like they just smile at you, or like in Thailand, it's like, oh, my pen rai, which is like, oh, no worries. But like, there's actually a worry. It's not like that. They'll show face, right? So I think it's so-so. If you get to know them, that's not the case. Number 6 is that Germans are technologically advanced and well educated. Germans are perceived as highly educated and they have advanced technology. And I have found this very true living here. I think the majority of people I know studied engineering or science, or they're very into renewable energy. I also live in Freiburg, which all of those things are big here. But in total, I mean, you think about cars, German engineering, BMW, VW. And so, yes, that is huge here. I also find that the level of education, although I've never studied here, other friends that I know have studied here, and talking to my husband about it, the level in which education is higher. And what I mean by that is like even in university, the amount of tests they do, the amount of research they have to do, even at a bachelor level and not even a master's level, is much higher than what we do in the US. I think that it's much higher to reach a higher grade here. And you also see it in how their system is built, which I won't get into right now, but kind of that they switch from 4th grade, and that kind of determines which high school they go to, is kind of the quickest way to explain it. There's like 3 different high schools. So I think education is held very high here. I think also in jobs, like even when people go into apprenticeships and stuff, like it's not as common in the US, but an apprentice is like usually someone you feel like they're like little mousy and they're kind of figuring it out. And here I feel like when I have worked at jobs here and you see like an apprentice come in, like they already know what they're doing. And I think that speaks for the education system. Like they're confident and they're like really seeking, like, what can I do to get this experience? They're already, I would say, quite qualified for being a new person starting out in a job. And yeah, as I said, here in this area, renewable energy and science is also really popular. It has a high presence in this country. And the government here offers a variety of funding programs, especially for engineering and tech startups. They for example, like a company that I had worked for in the past, they were students at a university. They had a great idea, and then they took that idea and got funding from the government to create an actual company with that. And that's really common here, that they support, especially within technology, bringing things into fruition. So as I said, I would consider this one highly true. Number 7 is the love of bureaucracy. Germans love paperwork, permits, long official processes. I don't know if they love it, but it is so ingrained here. Like, this is absolutely true. And they joke about it, and it's funny, but not funny. I've experienced this between getting my Niederlassungserlaubnis, between applying for my German citizenship, the amount of papers I've had to submit again and again, even in my permanent residency time, because each office doesn't like, and this is where like it's still a little old school. A lot of things is still done not digitally on paper. The amount of times that I've had to resubmit papers to different offices because it's not like put in a system and shared. And they're very adamant about getting every single detail of paper, which I get. But yeah, I mean, my driver's license, when I did it here, which I want to make a video about soon for any, like, especially Americans and other people that are trying to get a driver's license here, to kind of give like a step guide how that works, because that was a little bit hard and confusing for me. But anyways, yeah, as coming from a person who already drove for like 15 years before I applied for my license here, the amount of like paperwork and tests and things I had to do, and the cost, I felt like was quite crazy. Now I understand it was reciprocity. I came from a state in the US where kind of has the same requirements, and that's why they do it. It's not like that for every state, but it was a lot. And even like seeing my husband, how many times he's had to transfer papers back and forth, especially like when we lived in the US and we came back here. And especially I see it in jobs here. One thing that America has that I think Germany doesn't, or the US has, the US, is that you can really make yourself into something, even if you didn't study something. Like you see it in, I think, Steve Jobs, like a lot of these like big guys, I think Jeff Bezos, they dropped out of college or they didn't finish college. And I think that is not feasible here in Germany in the same way. It's just not. And here people want the paperwork, it's hard to do like a boot camp and get in, like in the US, like coding camps and AI camps are really popular, and you can go in and you can make six figures by doing something like that. But here, it's just really not feasible. It's much, much harder. People want the paperwork. They want to see you went and got a degree. Networking is not the same sort of thing as it is in the US, that kind of, if you know the right people and you're intelligent enough, you can get in. Here, like people want to see the paperwork here. So I find the love of bureaucracy to be highly true here. And it is hard to get around it if you want to. Number 8 is that Germans are huge environmentalists. And I also find this to be highly true. They're big on biking, they're big on green energy, and of just caring about the environment in total. I will say I live in Freiburg, or near Freiburg, and that is kind of like the green capital of Germany. So like it's very like the Green Party often wins here, and they're huge on like organic, natural resource, naturally made clothing, and bicycles are, from what I've heard, like this is one of the most common cities for bicycling in total here in Germany. And so I definitely see it here, and I don't know if that kind of affects my overall decision of how much Germans like are environmentalists and put focus on green politics. But here where I am, it is a huge thing. I'm pretty sure where I live here in Freiburg, there are more bikes than cars. And the whole middle of the city, you have no access with cars whatsoever, which I know is that way in a lot of, especially German cities. I've seen that. And then clean energy is subsidized by the movement. So, like especially, for example, my brother-in-law, he got solar energy on his roof, and he got an e-car, and like the government subsidized some of those things and gave back money to him because they're pushing green energy so hard. I looked it up. So according to the Bundesministerium für Wirtschaft und Energie, which is like an official website here in Germany, as of 2019, I couldn't find like an official website with something sooner, but just to give a perspective, the largest renewable energy capacity under China, which had 404 gigawatts, and USA with 180 gigawatts. Now, keep in mind, those are million and billion, like, what am I saying? Like they have far more people. I think the US has around 400 million population. I don't know how much China has, and Germany has only around 80 million. So China with 404, USA with 180, and Germany with 113. So 113 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. That's a huge difference. I mean, the US has 180 and Germany has 113. So that's quite close considering the difference in size. I mean, it's like 6 times the size of the US. And then another statistic is so in per capita terms, each person in Germany can use, based off of the amount of renewable energy they have, 1.4 kilowatts of renewable energy. And It is by far the highest figure in the world. The US can only use zero point 0.6 kilowatts per person, and Euro in total 0.7. So as you can see, energy and environmental topics and protecting the earth, also you see it in the way that trash is sorted here, are a huge thing in Germany, and I would consider this highly true. Number 9, we're getting close to the end here, is that they are direct communicators, that Germans often are viewed as blunt and overly honest. And I do believe this is true. At first, I found it really intimidating, like especially like in a work setting, when they would just say like directly, like this is good and this is bad, like this has to be redone. Like in the US, we kind of like, you know, try to mold around that and make it like pretty and nice. And at first, it like made me scared, and I was like, oh, I'm not doing my job right. And now I've come to really appreciate it, because you know what you're doing good, and you can trust what they said means you're doing it good. If they said that you need to work on that, it means you need to work on that, and you can put your time in it. So I find it really refreshing. I know like a lot of people from other countries struggle with it, and I still also sometimes struggle with it. Like I said, I talked about many of times, like especially making friends. I thought like, oh, they didn't like me, especially like if we had a different view about something. I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the end of that. But now I see that's not the case. Like they're just really honest about their feelings and what they think. And I think that's refreshing to be able to talk about that, especially coming from like the environment of the US at the moment. We're like talking about, especially like something, you know, in politics, like you cannot have a different opinion and discuss it. Like I think that's part of the problem that we're having in the US. And here, I feel like that you can, that people are blunt and open. Now, I know that there's parts of Germany that have different, like vastly different opinions. I don't live near there, and maybe that's why. But and that's just in the terms of politics, to be honest. But yeah, I find it refreshing in the workplace and friendships that people are really direct communicators and they let you know. And so, yes, I would find the stereotype very true. And last and not least, and I'm going to do my best to be careful and sensitive about this topic, is that Germany is still haunted by World War II history. Um, a lot of Americans reduce Germany's identity down to that time, to World War II. And to be honest, I think a lot of it is because that's what we learn in textbooks. We learn about that. We learn about America being the heroes of World War II, which is a common thing that we love to do with all of our history. Taking accountability sometimes is difficult for us. And yeah, I think this is quite outdated. It's quite insensitive. And I think modern Germany is deeply reflective of their history. You see that they see how harmful it is. You see that they have it in legislation, in their current like culture of how they do things. You see it that they really did not back down. They looked at themselves in the face and they made the change. There is strict anti-Nazi legislation here. You cannot deny the Holocaust here. You can't say something like that here. Certain like baby names, I'm sure you can guess which ones, are not allowed here. National pride here is approached cautiously. Like you don't see a lot of people here like waving the flag around and like, yeah, Germany, except for during except for during the FIFA Cup or like soccer times. That's something different. But yeah, they're very careful about national pride. They are very careful not to flaunt their military. They have many open memorials in remembrance of the events that happened. I see memorials in remembrance of this all over. I made a short recently about the stumbling stones here in Germany and many other countries here in Europe that were created by a German artist that sit in front of buildings where people who lost their lives during World War II lived, and it kind of tells a little bit of their story. Holocaust education in schools is huge. I mean, they start learning, I think my husband said at like 12 or 13, they already start learning about it. A lot of people go and visit concentration camps. They have strong support for the EU, for UN, for NATO, for these groups that work to build like a grouping, or I think coalition would be the right word, to kind of protect and stay as, you know, like a grouping and not isolate themselves. they offer asylum, which I know is controversial these days, but like they offer a lot of asylum for a lot of refugees that need homes more than anywhere else in Europe, more than many other places in the world. And a large part of that is because of their history, and they want to help people. There's something called Erinnerungskultur here, which is meaning like remembrance culture. And it is pushed in children's education. And as I said, like things like having to visit past historical sites from that time. You definitely still can hear stories about it, like I've heard from great grandparents of my husband's family, and I've heard from other people. For example, I know a German couple that fled to the US post-war when the Berlin Wall was still up, and like hearing kind of their stories of how they were affected by the post-war in that time. So of course, there's bits of that like history that is felt regularly if you broke it down and thought about it. Like it has made a huge influence on it here. But as you can see, I think that they've worked really hard to take accountability for what happened and to build a better country for many, many people. And I think that's something that's really admirable and should be looked at, because cough, cough, shove, shove, like there's definitely other countries that are not taking accountability for those things. So I'm going to say the stereotype is just simply not true. It is just very outdated, very insensitive. And as I said, Germany is a greatly diverse country, and you cannot place it back to that one time in history as generalizing a whole country, because they have made so many changes since then. So with that said, let me know in the comments if any of these stereotypes you believe to be true and how you found them true or not true. And if you're German, let me know if there's any stereotypes, German stereotypes that you've heard that I did not mention from other people, and your take on them. I would be really interested to hear. And with that said, I hope I see you in the next video. Have a great day. Tschüss.